story events.
There's
all
no way.
sorts of
How are you
different
doing
things
this?
will be
How did you
affected
pick that
by,
one out of all?
How
I never told you to
the
pick that
progress
one.
you make, how you
That camera.
proceed,
Cauldron's ready for me now.
that sort of thing. Well, yeah, let's talk to Hecate and then we could.
I already told you to
out the
pick that
cauldron.
camera,
At
my
least
guy.
our cauldron's finally purified, praise the fates. Speaking of which, are you as yet considering an invocation to them? Have my doubts that they would listen even now.
Reminder, signs of disloyalty should be reported to the democracy officer.
Though I'm well short of freshly picked reagents still.
I'd offer such
Mission
reagents if
board,
I could.
Allied destroyer has joined squadron. Engaging orbital thrusters. Orbit synchronized.
Are you serious? What just happened? Are people like this? You just wasted my time.
So what are you doing?
I'm playing a game and I just got kicked. For what?
Why you asking me about Fox?
I didn't.
Yes, you did.
What?
I said, why you asking me about Fox?
The hour of our next victory rapidly.
Because I'm streaming.
Let us cleanse
Hold
the
on.
galaxy of alien
What?
scum.
People need to close their privacy settings if they're not gonna let anybody in.
Mission coordinates locked. Hellpods prime.
My phone is charging for you. Oh,
Engaging orbital thrusters.
just look at the caffeine. He's on his way to our house with the children.
Orbit synchronized.
Don't laugh too hard.
Let me call you back. I don't even have Zoom installed. That's funny. I didn't even think about that.
Allied destroyer joining squadron, deploying Helldiver.
Go now, and fear the shadow of neither death nor tyranny, but justice.
Allied destroyer joining squadron, deploying Helldiver.
My leg.
Deploying equipment package.
Requesting air support. Requesting air support.
I actually need to. I should have done this before. What did I turn on? Or where did I set it to? Oh, okay. That should be fine.
Requesting jackpack. Sending in an eagle. Calling down a sentry. Reinforcing.
Request approved. Deploying
Orbital strike.
Firing orbital strike.
Requesting air support. Sending in an eagle. Bug tunnel breach. Dropping a pin. Southwest. 300 meters.
Rare sample acquired. Sending in an eagle.
Wait, lever. Sending in an eagle. Rare sample collected. Requesting sentry. Marking location. Southwest. Bug outpost spotted. Prepare to exterminate.
Oh, is there a regular zone?
Found something. Calling in reinforcements.
Request approved. Deploying reinforcements.
Dropping a pin. Northwest. 100 meters southeast.
Wait, that's not what we use. That's the issue I'm having. We use. The fuck is it called, actually? The fuck is it called? No, seriously, I forgot what it's called.
Bug outpost
I
spotted.
didn't mean to do that.
Bug tunnel breach. Requesting sentry.
Signal. That's what.
Reinforcing.
Request approved. Reinforcements on the way.
Are you fucking?
Requesting air support.
Eagle 1 returning to destroyer for resupply.
Tagging map. West. Far. Supplies. Dropping a pin. West. 300 meters.
Reinforcing.
Reinforcing. Enemy elite. Southwest. 50 meters. Sending in an eagle. Enemy elite. North. 50 meters. Requesting air support. Requesting air support. Requesting sentry.
What did it do? I didn't hear it ring. It usually ring on the other side too. That's weird. No, it rings on the other way. It rings on the other side. I'm being weird or whatever.
Sending in an eagle.
What? Are you? See, you're being hostile again for no reason.
Tagging map. West.
Yeah.
100 meters. Requesting air support.
It's a movie about people. Hostile's a movie about people who get murdered because they go to a weird hotel when they travel a lot of out of the.
Tunnel breach.
Who's mortgage payment? They know just their payment, not their mortgage, not like the whole.
Calling in reinforcements.
Allied destroyer has left the squadron.
Oh my god! Not this shit again.
Keep liberty.
Tagging map. Northeast. 100 meters.
Got him.
Nah,
Objective located. North.
because if it was that high, God, where did he come from? Nah, I'm irritated.
Package acquired. Dropping package. Ready to liberate.
Allied destroyer joining squadron. Deploying Helldiver.
Dropping a pin. Northeast.
Second thousand. What is? What do you mean?
Package acquired. Dropping package.
sample collected.
Package acquired. Dropping package.
Dropping a pin.
Objective located.
Northeast. Far.
Package acquired. Dropping package. Package acquired. Dropping package.
Rare sample
acquired.
collected.
Dropping package.
Northeast. Far.
Package acquired. Dropping package. Tagging map. North, 300 meters. Enemy elite. North, 50 meters.
Requesting air support.
Calling in reinforcements.
Now, who has this $800,000 mortgage? There's no way, because if you're that rich, you would just buy the house outright. There's no in between there. You either have that kind of money to buy the. Okay.
Sending in an eagle. Tagging location. Northwest. Cancel that. Supplies. Northwest. Supplies. Marking location. Supplies. Tagging location. Northwest. Cancel that. Cancel that. Northwest. Marking location.
Tagging map. West. 100 meters.
Sending in an eagle.
Rare sample collected.
Requesting orbital. Ain't bad.
Yeah, what'd it do?
Reinforcing.
Some baby somewhere's always crying.
Request approved.
Niggas die every day, B.
Sample.
I thought I just lied.
Bug tunnel breach. Heavy. Sending in an eagle. Requesting air support. You have been a stalwart line of freedom. Extract when ready. Requesting air support. Sending in an eagle.
Dropping a pin. South. 200 meters.
is this so dark? Turn the lights. Turn the lights back on. It's so dark.
200 meters.
I wanna go. No, I'm not okay. I'm never okay.
Requesting air support.
Tagging map. West. 100 meters.
Tagging map. South. Far.
Oh shit, nope, time to go. Nope, absolutely not.
Extraction is available.
I just saw Stalker, that's why I'm heading in the opposite direction.
Freedom forever!
I'm not getting killed by no Stalker today, that's for sure. Okay, I got a question for you. So, transparency, right? Hello? For you to use the word transparent, it has to be completely see-through, right? Otherwise, it's just translucent, right? Because translucent means it's a little bit opaque, right?
Support weapon.
Right? Am I right? I've never heard anyone say it like that or explain it that way.
Supplies.
And nobody uses the word translucent.
You may proceed to extraction when ready.
Have a taste of democracy! Requesting orbital strike!
Extraction shuttle inbound.
Maybe that's not what I saw, because these little clouds starting to look like what I saw earlier.
Tagging location.
They no, look like how they're supposed to look, I'll tell you that much.
ETA T-minus 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Oh my god. What are they still doing out there?
ETA T-minus 1 minute.
You gonna fight a baby? Wow. He's about to be 2, that makes it better that you're fighting a baby because he's about to be 2. That's the age limit on giving a kid a butt whooping, is he's about to turn 2. No, you know I'm streaming right now. They can't hear you. That's not good. Out here beating up 2-year-olds.
T-minus 30 seconds. Request approved. Deploying reinforcements. ETA T-minus 20 seconds. ETA T-minus 10 seconds.
You know what we need to be focused on? We need to be focusing on a technology that allows you to sleep but not lose any time.
Pelican 1 arriving at coordinates.
Like, I get 8 hours of sleep, but then actually turns out, surprise, I still have 20 hours before I gotta get to work. What the fuck? Who the fuck did that?
Calling in reinforcements.
Request approved. Deploying reinforcements.
Who goofed that up?
Ready to liberate.
Hey, which one of you goofed that up?
Ending in an eagle. Countdown initiated. Stand by for takeoff. Extraction complete. Pelican 1 beginning ascent.
Can we not fucking call something on fucking
Victory was
please?
never
Thank you.
in doubt.
What'd it do? If I wasn't there, they would have all got wiped. That's crazy. If I wasn't standing where I was standing, I'd have been mission over. La 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 la. Warm it up.
Another victory has been marked. Welcome aboard, Helldiver.
Innocents perish with every wasted second. We must act.
So I don't wait for nothing. Damn, these upgrades are expensive. Gucci sock, really? What does this do? Exploding crossbow sounds amazing. I can't wait to get that. La 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 la. Warm it up.
Pod launch initiated.
I'm always doing one of these, and nobody tells me. I could have.
The insurmountable might of the Helldivers.
I mean, I didn't look at the thing either, but that's not the point.
Bug tunnel breach. Requesting air support.
Delivering payload.
Sending in an eagle.
Keep liberty.
Freedom forever! Calling in reinforcements! Out of ammo!
Have a taste of democracy.
Point to the front!
Allied destroyer joining squadron. Deploying Helldiver.
Oh my god, I didn't even see that fucker. What the hell was that? Get off.
Bag's empty! Requesting Walker! Sending in an eagle! Reloading! Say hello to democracy! Bag's empty! Requesting air support! Last reload!
Bug tunnel breach.
Reloading! Helldivers never die!
How'd you like the taste of freedom? Heavy east close. Freedom triumphs over tyranny once more. The extraction shuttle awaits your request.
Heavy. North. On my position.
Extraction request confirmed. Shuttle inbound. This is Pelican 1. I have visual on the extraction zone.
Calling in orbital strike. Another sample selected for democracy.
Pelican
You're
1 to depart. Shuttle launch in
Why did it take off? I hate these missions. Why did it take off? I don't remember saying countdown was started. We're seeing a countdown timer on the screen.
destroyer has left squadron. Orbit synchronized. Allied destroyer has joined squadron. Engaging orbital thrusters.
Go, shawty. It's your birthday.
Now, it may seem like the opening skit and commentary were rife with complaints and critiques, but jokes aside, I have been enjoying playing the game recently, much more than I did back then. Back then, I was playing with friends that had a pessimistic view of the game on top of Twitch, YouTube chat, kind of echoing the worst parts of the game without really allowing myself to play on my own time and really soak it in. In the last few months, I've played with all the new updates to Special Ridden, card tweaks, the new DLCs, including Tunnels of Terror and Children of the Worm, and more so than anything, it does not feel impossibly difficult and an overall chore to get through for the most part. Honestly, since launch, the game has definitely improved, but a lot of this contention from the bots and my experiences varied vastly in these two departments. I started enjoying myself with the Back 4 Blood experience on my third attempt once I forced myself to start playing some decks and whatnot. But that's not to say there aren't some inherent issues that I have with it, as it is, as it was, and what it marketed itself as, giving itself a never-ending comparison with Left 4 Dead that it will always have leaning over itself. They kind of put it there of their own regard.
And should you fall, remember this. Every day is a good day to die for democracy.
And what better way to start this year in retrospective than a comparison so we can get those formalities out of the way. The biggest thing about Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 is their concept and playstyle that are deceptively simple. Simplicity is key. While I have been enjoying the hell out of Back 4 Blood on my third full attempt, there's the fact that it took me putting my nose to the grindstone, making a build that made the game fun to go through, and figuring out strategies that can and cannot work. Having to grind for cards, synergize them, pick specific characters for their abilities, Special Ridden of similar appearance but different abilities, having to know all that, stamina management, and more are pillars that work for and against this series. Now, if that's your cup of tea, that's perfectly fine. But for a general audience and their first impressions and just wanting a game to dive into, much like Left 4 Dead, there's something crucially important that needs to be taken into account. As stated earlier, Left 4 Dead 2 is retaining high monthly player numbers, almost 4 times more than Back 4 Blood on PC. And that is even after Back 4 Blood released new DLC. Why is that? And before you come chiming in with, it's a poor copy of Left 4 Dead, or it's a bad game, or the game is dead, I'm not saying Back 4 Blood is not bad, and it's not dead, it's still kind of a copy of Left 4 Dead though. And also there's going to be some dude bros chiming in saying, well, you're not counting in the Game Pass in the console numbers. Well, you're not counting in the Left 4 Dead 2 on 360 numbers, there's still a big volume there too. But I digress. It's just not the game a large portion of the population would get sucked into, nor what they expected. What made Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 such an endearing experience is simple, and I said it already. It's simplicity. Somewhat like an arcade shooter. It's easy to boot up, with some friends or play with some bots and just go. Learning as you go, picking up a gun to find, and just being able to pinpoint infected and how to combat them relatively easily. There wasn't a layer of complexity that you had to know beforehand in order to combat a lot of it. No corruption cards, no needing to know how this card worked, not this copper thing, how to manage your currency. There wasn't all this stuff loading it up. As we get into later, every aspect of Back 4 Blood has bloated complexity to it. It feels like everything needs to have an elongated thought process from both development and player side. From the outside looking in to moment-to-moment gameplay.
We play test close to every day because we have to ensure that no matter what we do, that moment to moment is what people are expecting from us.
In Left 4 Dead, healing is straightforward. You take pills, you get temporary health. You use a med kit, you heal a decent portion. In Back 4 Blood, you deal with trauma health, and there's no guarantee you'll heal quite right unless you know the ins and outs of certain cards, healing stations, and more. Left 4 Dead specials being easily discernible due to their unique silhouettes to figure out, while special rigging have 4 different types of each different class that are not as easily discernible to figure out in moment-to-moment combat with each other. Keep in mind that different corruption cards for each of the chapters, having less room to experiment and explore with the continue system that will shut your playthrough down if everyone dies, and the longevity.
Shoulders,
it
knees, and
really
toes,
harps
knees
on
and
trying to
toes.
make a more difficult experience while you try not too much on the fun experience. Back 4 Blood has tons of guns and attachments that go with them, and I love having a wide variety of guns, don't get me wrong. Although most of them really aren't that fun to use, and finding them comes with downsides, having no statistics, having a good sight, and more that you have to read through instead of purely picking up a gun and running and gunning without worry of recoil, efficiency, and more. The same can be said with the card system, and even with the character selection. In Left 4 Dead, you pick a survivor because you like their personality. In this, you like the personality on top of, do they have a good build, what's their side ability, what do they come with? There has got to be something to everything. And it all compounds into a lot to factor into and work with, versus a straight-to-the-point game and experience like Left 4 Dead, versus the multiple hybrid fusion game like Back 4 Blood that is fun to grind and beef yourself up in, but struggles to stand on its own identity with many ideas and little to no simplicity.
From the very beginning, we knew what kind of game we wanted to make, and we identified the things that would get us there. Thrilling moment-to-moment gameplay, 4-player co-op with competitive PvP, a bigger fight with much bigger enemies, and extreme replayability. Before we start spending time on making sure that the game looks good, we have to make sure that we have a fun, core gameplay experience.
I remember on my first playthrough with my friends, we all had a hellish time on the easiest difficulty trying to get through. Spawns for specials were nearly non-stop, trauma damage made it where healing was difficult and frustrating, and so many other compounding factors for those new to the game really turned a lot of people off. And if there's one thing a game has to do to really stay fresh in the minds of people is make a decent first impression. That is exactly why I'm bringing up the game how it was at launch versus how it is now. Many people, myself included, assumed the game would remain as it was and had already moved on from it. Not dissing people that enjoyed the higher difficulty and have stuck with it till now, this review isn't here to talk about how it used to be, as that's what you're probably here for. As someone that played near launch, a disappointed non-buyer, or a longtime fan, I want this to be my thorough thoughts on Back 4 Blood as it is now. So how do we start now that we got Left 4 Dead stuff out of the way? Well, the biggest deterrent away from simplicity's sake was the card system. Having to figure out a 15-card deck, reading each card and balancing it to work around certain weapons, playstyles, and synergizing with others. It can be a Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic Man's wet dream for some, and an FPS campaign player's annoyance to others. Don't get me wrong, I like the card system. I love making builds that can be overpowered, but for many, it's just bloated and too much to deal with. So let's go over some talking points and features that work well, even out and more with the Back 4 Blood experience.
Tagging map, southeast, 100 meters.
In my opinion on the card system is vastly different to how it was this time last year. Originally, you'd only get the first few cards in your deck in the first chapter of the act, and progressively get more in the order you put them in as you advanced in chapters, which really felt hampering against the onslaught of rigging and corruption cards, having to get your 15 cards over the course of 17 chapters. Now, cards are more fun purely for the fact that decks are fully usable from the start with all 15 cards available to use for your builds. This is probably the best change since the game's launch. Games before were agonizingly more difficult to scrape by on your deck, trying to make your deck bigger with each chapter. I think everyone, myself included, are happy to have a complete, beefy, and girthy, and pleasurable deck. Okay, deck jokes aside, it really is a step towards making a fun game so you can actually experiment with builds from the get-go on each playthrough. With that being said, when it comes to builds, you'll get a wide variety of playstyles to suit your needs. My friends will end up doing healer builds so trauma damage isn't an issue as they power heal the entire team with each med kit, or having accessory builds to spam grenades and tools to better take out hordes and bosses. But to be the best, you can have each person in the team having a different role. One person is healer, one is brawler to take out close range enemies, and long range decks to take out proximity threats from afar like exploders. It's really neat to put decks together and work things out with friends to knock out the winning hordes. I myself have two decks I frequently use a lot. A melee build oriented deck so I can emulate the Left 4 Dead days of the melee weapons, so I can easily plow through hordes of zombies since they are so effing sturdy with the constant mutations and tall boys needing some kind of counterplay and answer, or me using a glass cannon LMG build that lets me do tons of damage without having to reload so I can mow stuff down from afar. Or you could do my secret third deck of speedrunning, putting all cards into speed, stamina, and movement to just run through levels at supersonic speed. However, that also brings up something I really hate. The melee builds have been what I've had the most fun with, especially back about 6 to 7 months ago. But as any game these days tends to have, the devs want to slap on nerfs and buffs to keep the game fresh and appease tryhards. Speaking with friends like Whizfish and people I met while I was at PAX West, they invested heavily in melee builds and said that was the most fun they had playing the game once they had the build together. That was until they nerfed tons of the melee cards and melee in general. Yes, there is some argument that can be made about nerfing something as broken as the melee build was at launch with right build, but that's the thing. Broken can mean fun, especially in a PvE game. The biggest thing I could compare the card system to is Dead by Daylight's perk system. And while Dead by Daylight limits available perks to only 4, Back 4 Blood gives a wide selection of up to 15 cards. But there is a stark difference in the two and the balance the developers of the games want to have. Hell, with every patch they show tweaks, nerfs, and buffs to perks. But within the context of Dead by Daylight, it makes more sense to balance and change perks within the game, as it is purely a PvP experience. There is no PvE, however janky and unfixable that broken game is. So it makes sense to constantly be changing perks and whatnot so both sides don't feel underpowered or overpowered, and also there's not much else to do with the game. But for Back 4 Blood, the focus and large majority of the intended experience is within the context of the PvE campaign mode where you're playing against bots. And guess what bots don't do? They don't bitch about how broken the build is. So many of the changes to cards, nerf-wise, tended to feel like a deterrent to the fun you get, and more of one of those memes where the guy's just going, "Quit having fun! Take this seriously and adhere to the difficulty curves we set." But to be honest, difficult shit aside, getting fun builds and heavily bringing them down can turn a lot of people off, especially in the onslaught of higher difficulties and progressing through the game. A slight tangent, but hell, even speedrunning received a substantial hit early into the game's life, which again felt counterintuitive to a more enjoyable experience.
Certain builds that were popular and very fun to play were being targeted as builds that break the game, despite so many complaints about how nightmare was. These builds were clearly intended, and in a PvE game, stuff like that's bound to happen. It doesn't really make the experience any less fun. If anything, it makes it more fun and allows for a more fair nightmare experience for the more casual players. In what seems to be a lack of understanding of that dynamic, Turtle Rock listened to that feedback and took it as a sign that they needed to nerf the builds
nerfing board game mechanics that feed into these cards and making them less valuable, and allows for speedrunning efficiency. Not only that, but speedrun-centric stamina cards too. If you didn't know, speedrunning actually adds to a game's interest and replayability. Hell, Waifu Runs recently did a speedrun event for all of Left 4 Dead's achievements in one go, with tons of people on the now 13-year-old game, and it had a lot of viewers with the amount of movement tech, glitches, and exploits used in the game. Whole communities are built up on Twitch, YouTube, Discord, and more, and they find a lot of entertainment out of it. It adds a whole new spectrum to the game. Channel Maxilobes actually does a pretty deep dive into how neutered the game's speedrunning, movement, and cards were patched away after gamers were excited to share how much fun and excitement they had getting speedrunning to work. And it was shortly after this that devs addressed this not with optimism, but altering mechanics and making that movement clunky, even going as far as Turtle Rock possibly using speedrunners and their VODs to introduce questionable nerfs, making it to where you couldn't run, there had to be a speed gaining system.
It made speedrunning slower, it nerfed a satisfying bit of tech in the game, and it also kind of ruined movement for a lot of players, not just speedrunners.
That way you couldn't just have fun with the movement.
We're going to be constantly making content and watching other people make content that we can share with each other. Gamers are going to be showing us things we didn't even know could happen.
We want the game to change over time, and so we're excited to release the game and then see what the community attaches to and what they get really excited about.
Now, I can already hear people saying, stop crying, cope, seethe, adapt. But man, I just want to have fun and experiment with how goofy the game can be. I know some people are all about making it as hard as possible, but for a lot of people that's not the case. Whether it's movement tech, cards, and more. Now that tangent on speedrunning in the cards section might seem unrelated, but I can't stress enough focusing on making an entertaining experience where builds can be broken. Video Game Donkey made a good statement about Overwatch 2's upcoming PvE that really reflects on my views on how Back 4 Blood should be with its campaign experience, since versus campaign is never going to be a factor in good balance. Pertaining to builds that are broken and overpowered,
what's nice about PvE is that you can allow characters to be broken and really focus on empowering the player.
Again, if this were PvP, I'd understand, but half the cards in campaign aren't even in the PvP swarm mode. PvP should be a playground to fuck around with these builds. The cards are honestly the best part of the game. It's the whole reason for me to grind in game outside the cosmetics to beef up builds. Recently, buffs I've seen are decent and okay, but the amount of nerfs should be really
No, come on, bro.
The game shouldn't be about what the devs want you
Game
to
crash.
builds and how you should play, but what the gamer wants to play and how they want to play.
So much time wasted. I can't hear you. You sound so
cards
muffled.
were also introduced half a year ago in order to not only give rewards to people that unlocked everything in the supply lines, but to give pretty good one-time use advantages to playthroughs, like a random gun with random attachments, more health or ammo, and even legendary weapons, more on those later, that honestly feel like they break the game enough in an entertaining way that I'm surprised Turtle Rock actually green flagged and have it nerfed. But they do make for fun useful cards, even if they are one-time use. And honestly, fill a good hole in the unlock supply system to give something that can be earned indefinitely. A decent addition. Now, card decks can also be enhanced slightly on the fly throughout a playthrough of an act, where sometimes card packs appear on the ground. And that hasn't changed since launch, as you can add cards to your deck for the cost of copper, meaning you'll have to make sure to keep some copper on hand throughout a level. Copper isn't nearly as much of an issue once you start actually getting used to it and accumulating these days, thanks to certain corruption cards and better level rewards. But something I do have a problem with to this day is the fact that you have to come to a complete stop in what you're doing to read the effects of the card. Make sure you aren't buying a card you absolutely have no use for, like buying a shotgun-based card when your build focuses on LMGs.
The Helldivers.
If you want to use the card at that expense, and if you do want to use it, possibly communicate to your team and see if they'll drop enough copper for you to buy the card. Or maybe this card is good for one of your teammates who's sitting there pinging the hell out of it, but everyone else is busy fighting commons and you're sitting there pinging it all the time. But this deliberation of cards, if they are useful, if you have enough, you can ask your copper to buy it, and reading some of the cards with Yu-Gi-Oh! Descriptions just is not something for a fast-paced game in the Elf style. I don't know how many times I've experienced my friends and I, mostly Murmur, seeing a card or attachment on the ground during a horde, or having to move and people ignoring all of that in order to do everything I just mentioned. It's such a time sink and a road bump. 9 out of 10 dentists agree that this is annoying in a game where action is happening frequently, and an AI director that detects inactivity to spawn hordes and corruption cards like ridden hordes every 2 minutes. There's just way too much you're having to process in this thing where you're supposed to go, go, go. Yeah, you could say that eventually you'll learn what each card does and know on the fly if you'll need it or not. But it's like the game is trying to be Borderlands with loot drops, where you read the description of a gun once a boss is dead and mull over if you want to use it, go, oh, that's really good, I might use that. Except in Borderlands, when the boss is dead and all that loot has popped out of his butt, the game gives you time to breathe and to loot all of that. Here, it's, well, you spent too long reading your card, your teammate is pinned, the horde timer has gone off, and a comment just smacked you in the back of the ass and called you mommy. It's just really annoying. A while back when it came to the card system, I was hoping that Turtle Rock would introduce a veritable bare-bones classic mode where cards would be outed, as well as trauma health, but that's a personal bias. You don't really have to get rid of the trauma health. To give more of that streamlined, easy to sink your teeth into Left 4 Dead experience from the creators of Left 4 Dead, so people can hop in and not stress over card builds, the meta, more. Honestly though, despite a lot of criticism thus far, I'd say the card system is the most fun part of the game, as it gives a reason to play campaign more so you can earn new stuff to experiment and builds, and have a different experience each time, as you have like 7 or 8 different builds by the time you have all the cards. Just make sure that the build you put together is good, because you're stuck with it until you run out of continues or dip out of your run. But if that's not your style, I don't think a classic mode is ever going to be in the cards, or I guess I should say out of the cards. Speaking of cards, there's a whole set of other cards I haven't mentioned yet.
So when you start a game, one of the first things that you're going to see is the corruption cards that the game director has played against you.
Whether it makes the world super dark or super foggy and limits your visibility, or if it's throwing hordes of mutant-ridden at you, right, that now you gotta face 8 of them.
And so then you're able to choose from your cards what it is that you're going to counter with. You try different card combinations with your friends. You can play through the full campaign. You can replay the same mission. No experience is going to be the same twice.
Back in my beta alpha reviews, I brought up how corruption cards kind of rip away the mystery of each experience. In Left 4 Dead, you didn't know what was ahead of you when it came to special infected tank and witch spawns, along with hordes, item spawns, and more. Now you have things pretty much telegraphed to you before you even leave the spawn, like a wandering boss ridden is definitely going to show up, so better bring your frags and stingers.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
You won't be seeing much of the stinger class because we decided you'll be playing against a horde of reekers. While some cards like Fog and Blackout make the dynamic of a chapter different, as your line of sight can be a bit murkier and give the level a good aesthetic difference each time you play, I find most challenges in corruption cards make things more irritating than entertainingly challenging, such as one that I mentioned before,
still there?
that automatically summons hordes every 2 minutes with the military sergeant going, "You make so much noise, every ridden in the area is coming down on you." It was to my understanding that the director you pride yourself on from the Left 4 Dead
I was testing my audio
was the
on
one that
stream
would silently determine when hordes would
and make
spawn
sure they
depending
couldn't hear
on
you and they
the
could not.
variables.
Thank God. Can you imagine if you were on stream with me?
Monitor their health, and then we start choreographing the world around them. And the idea is to
They can't hear you.
Everybody gets a
But keep talking. Let me double check.
But to have a constant timer and the narrative say, "Yep, you weren't making noise, but I'm saying you made noise, so here comes a horde," just irritates me. We have corruption cards that force a
Keep
hunger
talking.
mechanic that make you search for food as you gradually take 1 trauma damage due to hunger every 15 seconds. Common Infected will also have corruption cards that change
they
how
can't
they
hear
are
you.
to their core features. Zombie and volatile, meaning headshots
Why did you
from
change
source
sounds
cause them
on
to
me?
explode and knock you back with damage, being really annoying in high
Do I sit on it or
altitude areas,
something?
making melees feel unfun suddenly. Maybe if they were in league with
Why nobody
uncommon
asked you
infected like
three
in Left 4 Dead 2 and were infrequent and designated to certain levels, but randomly having them in your face and getting bopped everywhere, again, is pretty damn annoying and seems like an idea thrown out and not really debated about for too long. Speaking of ideas that probably had little to no objection, some commons will have acid that pours out of them when they die, like Left 4 Dead 2 Spitter, and while neat on paper, is really just annoying again to deal with. As the numbers pile up and the acid remains still hard to see, which remember that was also an argument we talked about, but we'll get into that when we talk about the special ridden. In lieu of the AI director randomly spawning special infected, ridden.
What is his name?
Can be added to your deck.
Fear infamous sus.
Which kind of gets rid of
You're
even more of that AI
you're
director
sus.
mystery.
You're infamously
Usually
sus.
Like spawn a charger
That's
in Left 4
hilarious.
Dead, and here it's like, oh, in the top right of your HUD, you psychosomatically know that crushers are just now going to start. Spawning, so be prepared. I hope you know how to combat them. It's weird.
Mission coordinates locked. Hellpod prime. Engaging orbit.
When are we going to the movies, bro?
Orbit synchronized.
When are we going to the movies, bro? I can't hear you.
From it. Not dissing people that enjoyed the higher difficulty and have stuck with it till now, this review isn't here to talk about how it used to be, as that's what you're probably here for. As someone that played near launch, a disappointed non-buyer, or a longtime fan, I want this to be my thorough thoughts on Back 4 Blood as it is now. So how do we start now that we got Left 4 Dead stuff out of the way? Well, the biggest deterrent away from simplicity's sake was the card system. Having to figure out a 15-card deck, card, and balancing it to work against certain weapons, playstyles, and synergizing with others. It can be a Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic Nerd's wet dream for some, and an FPS campaign player's annoyance to others. Don't get me wrong, I like the card system. I love making builds that can be overpowered, but for many, it's just bloated and too much to deal with. So let's go over some talking points and features that work well, even out, and more with the Back 4 Blood experience. In my opinion on the card system is vastly different to how it was this time last year. Originally, you'd only get the first few cards in your deck in the first chapter of the act, and progressively get more in the order you put them in as you advanced in chapters, which really felt hampering against the onslaught of Ridden and Corruption cards, having to get 15 cards over the course of 7 different chapters. Now, cards are more fun purely for the fact that decks are fully usable from the start with all 15 cards available to use for your builds. This is probably the best change since the game's launch. Games before were agonizingly more difficult as you scraped by on your deck, trying to make your deck bigger with each chapter. I think everyone, myself included, are happy to have a complete, beefy, and girthy pleasure. Okay, deck jokes aside, it really is a step forwards making a fun game so you can actually experiment with builds from the get-go on each playthrough. With that being said, when it comes to builds, you'll get a wide variety of playstyles to suit your needs. My friends will end up doing healer builds so trauma damage isn't an issue as they power heal the entire team with each medkit, or having accessory builds to spam grenades and tools to better take out hordes and bosses. But to be the best, you can have each person in the team having a different role. One person is healer, one is brawler to take take out close-range enemies, and long-range decks to take out proximity threats from afar like exploders. It's really neat to put decks together and work things out with friends to knock out the ridden boards. I myself have 2 decks I frequent using a lot. A melee build-oriented deck so I can emulate the Left 4 Dead days of the melee weapons, so I can easily plow through boards of zombies since they are so effing sturdy with their constant mutations and tall boys needing some kind of counterplay and answer, or me using a glass cannon.
Speaking of, it's amazing that Resident Evil's never made a good multiplayer
or you could do my secret
zombie game.
Of speed level, putting all cards into speed, stamina, and
all the mechanics are there.
However, that also brings up something I really hate. The melee builds have been what I've had the most fun with, especially about 6 to 7 months ago. But as any game these days tends to have, the devs want to slap on nerfs and buffs to keep the game fresh and appease tryhards. Speaking with friends like Whizfish and people I met while I was at PAX West, they invested heavily in melee builds and said that was the most fun they had playing the game once they had the build together. That was until they nerfed tons of the melee cards and melee in general. Yes, there is some argument that can be made about nerfing something as broken as the melee build was at launch with the right build, but that's the thing. Broken can mean fun, especially in a PvE game. The biggest thing I could compare the card system to is Dead by Daylight's perk system. And while Dead by Daylight limits available perks to only 4, Back 4 Blood gives a wide selection of up to 15 cards. But there is a stark difference in the two, and the balance the developers of the games want to have. Hell, with every patch they show tweaks, nerfs, and buffs to perks. But within the context of Dead by Daylight, it makes more sense to balance and change perks within the game, as it is purely a PvP experience. There is no PvE, however janky and unfixable that broken game is. So it makes sense to constantly be changing perks and whatnot, so both sides don't feel underpowered or overpowered, and also there's not much else to do with the game. But for Back 4 Blood, the focus and large majority of the intended experience is within the context of the PvE campaign mode where you're playing against bots. And guess what bots don't do? They don't bitch about how broken the build is. So many of the changes to cards, nerf-wise, tended to feel like a deterrent to the fun you have, and more of one of those memes where the guy's just going, "Quit having fun! Take this seriously and adhere to the difficulty curves we set." But to be honest, difficult shit aside, getting fun builds and heavily bringing them down can turn a lot of people off, especially in the onslaught of higher difficulties and progressing through the game. A slight tangent, but hell, even speedrunning received a substantial hit early into the game's life, which again felt counterintuitive to a more enjoyable experience.
Certain builds that were popular and very fun to play were being targeted as builds that break the game. Despite so many complaints about how difficult Nightmare is, these builds were clearly intended. In a PvE game, stuff like that's bound to happen. It doesn't really make the experience any less fun. If anything, it makes it more fun and allows for a more fair Nightmare experience for the more casual players. And what seems to be a lack of understanding of that dynamic, Turtle Rock listened to that feedback and took it as a sign that they needed to nerf the builds that were too strong.
Nerfing core game mechanics that feed into these cards and making them less valuable, and allows for speedrunning efficiency. Not only that, but speedrun-centric stamina cards too. If you didn't know, speedrunning actually adds to a game's interest and replayability. Hell, Waifu Runs recently did a speedrun event for all of Left 4 Dead's achievements in one go, with tons of people on the now 13-year-old game, and it had a lot of viewers with the amount of movement tech, glitches, and exploits used in the game. Whole communities are built up on Twitch, YouTube, Discord, and more, and they find a lot of entertainment out of it. It adds a whole new spectrum to the game. Channel Maxilobes actually does a pretty deep dive into how neutered the game's speedrunning, movement, and cards were packed away after gamers were excited to share how much fun and excitement they had getting speedrunning to work. And it was shortly after this that devs addressed this not with optimism, but altering mechanics and making that movement clunky, even going as far as Turtle Rock possibly using speedrunners and their VODs to introduce questionable nerfs, making it to where you couldn't run. There had to be a speed gaming system.
It made speedrunning slower, it nerfed a satisfying bit of tech in the game, and it also kind of ruined movement for a lot of players, not just speedrunners.
That way you couldn't just fun with the movement.
We're going to be constantly making content and watching other people make content that we can share with each other. Gamers are going to be showing us things we didn't even know could happen.
We want the game to change over time, and so we're excited to release the game and then see what the community attaches to and what they get really excited about.
Now, I can already hear people saying,
come on.
Code, see, adapt. But man, I just want to have fun and experiment with how goofy the game can be. I know some people are all about making it as hard as possible, but for a lot of people that's not the case. Whether it's movement tech, cards, and more. Now that tangent on speedrunning in the cards section might seem unrelated, but I can't stress enough focusing on making an entertaining experience where builds can be broken. Video Game Junkie made a good statement about Overwatch 2's upcoming that really reflects on my views on how Back 4 Blood should be with this campaign experience, since versus campaign is never going to be a factor into balance pertaining to builds that are broken and overpowered.
What's nice about PvE is that you can allow characters to be broken and really focus on empowering the player.
Again, if this were PvP, I'd understand.
Why didn't you jump?
Half the cards in campaign aren't even in the PvP swarm mode. PvP should be a playground to fuck around with these builds. The cards are honestly the best part of the game. It's the whole reason for me to grind in game outside the cosmetics to beef up builds. Recently, buffs I've seen are decent and okay, but the amount of nerfs should be really minuscule at this point. A game shouldn't be about what the devs want you to put together in builds and how you should play, but what the gamer wants to play and how they want to play. But on the topic of cards once again, burn cards were also introduced half a year ago in order to not only give rewards to people that unlock everything in the supply lines, but to give pretty good one-time use advantages to playthroughs, like a random gun with random attachments, more health or ammo, and even legendary weapons, more on those later, that honestly feel like they break the game enough in an entertaining way that I'm surprised Turtle Rock actually green flagged and have it nerfed. But they do make for fun useful cards, even if they are one-time use. And honestly, fill a good hole in the unlock supply system to give something that can be earned indefinitely. A decent addition. Now, card decks can also be enhanced slightly on the fly throughout a playthrough of an act, where sometimes card packs appear on the ground. And that hasn't changed since launch, as you can add cards to your deck for the cost of 400 copper, meaning you'll have to make sure to keep some copper on hand throughout a level. Copper isn't nearly as much of an issue once you start actually getting used to it and accumulating these days, thanks to certain corruption cards and better level of rewards. But something I do have a problem with to this day is the fact that you have to come to a complete stop in what you're doing to read the effects of the card. Make sure you aren't buying a card you absolutely have no use for, like buying a shotgun-based card when your build focuses on RNGs. Think over if you want to use the card at that expense. If you do want to use it, possibly communicate to your team and see if they'll drop enough copper for you to buy the card. Or maybe this card is good for one of your teammates, so you sit there pinging the hell out of it, but everyone else is busy fighting commons and you're sitting there pinging it like a dumbass. But this deliberation of cards, if they are useful, if you have enough, if you can ask for copper to buy it, and reading some of the cards with Yu-Gi-Oh! SA levels of descriptions, just is not something for a fast-paced game in the L4D style. I don't know how many times I've experienced my friends and I, mostly Murmur, seeing a card or attachment on the ground during a horde, or having to move and people ignoring all of that in order to do everything I just mentioned. It's such a time sink and a roadblock. 9 out of 10 dentists agree that this is annoying in a game where action is happening frequently, and an AI director that detects inactivity to spawn hordes and corruption cards like ridden hordes every 2 minutes. There's just way too much you're having to process in this thing where you're supposed to go, go, go. Yeah, you could say that eventually you'll learn what each card does and know on the fly if you'll need it or not. But it's like the game is trying to be Borderlands with loot drops where you read the description of a gun once a boss is dead and mull over if you want to use it, go, oh, that's really good, I might use that. Except in Borderlands, when the boss is dead and all that loot had popped out of his butt, the game gives you time to breathe and delete all of that. Here, it's, well, you spent too long reading your card, your teammate is pinned, the horde timer has gone off, and a common just smacked you in the back of the ass and called mommy. It's just really annoying. A while back when it came to the card system, I was hoping that Turtle Rock would introduce a veritable bare-bones classic mode, where cards would be outed, as well as trauma health, but that's a personal bias. You don't really have to get rid of their trauma health. To give more of that streamlined, easy to sink your teeth into Left 4 Dead experience from the creators of Left 4 Dead, so people can hop in and not stress over card builds, the meta, and more. Honestly though, despite a lot of criticism thus far, I'd say the card system is the most fun part of the game, as it gives a reason to play campaign more so you can earn new stuff to experiment and builds, and have a different experience each time, as you have like 7 or 8 different builds by the time you have all the cards. Just make sure that the build you put together is good, because you're stuck with it until you run out of continues or depending.
I swear to God,
But if that's not
I swear to
your
God, if y'all
style,
leave without us,
I don't think a classic mode is ever going to be in the cards, or I guess I should say out of the cards. Speaking of cards, there's a whole set of other cards I haven't mentioned yet.
ETA T-minus 30 seconds.
So when you start a game, one of the first things that you're going to see is the corruption cards that the game director has played against you.
Whether it makes the world super dark or super foggy and limits your visibility, or if it's throwing hordes of mutant ridden at you, right? That now you got to face 8 of them.
T-minus 10 seconds.
And so then you're able to choose from your cards.
Come on, you're gonna pull this?
You try different card
Really?
combinations with your friends. You can play through the full campaign. You can play the same mission. No experience is going to be the same twice.
Back in my beta alpha reviews, I brought up how corruption cards kind of rip away the mystery of each experience. In Left 4 Dead, you didn't know what was ahead of you when it came to special infected, tank, and witch spawns, along with hordes, item spawns, and more. Now you have things pretty much telegraphed to you before you even leave the spawn, like a wandering boss ridden is definitely going to show up, so better bring your frags and stuns. Or you won't be seeing much of the Stinger class because we decided you'll be playing against a horde of reekers. While some cards like Fog and Blackout...
Oh, we could have got the super samples. I didn't need them, so I decided not to go after them.
And give the level a good aesthetic difference each time you play. I find
They should have said something. They were just chilling back there.
make things more irritating than entertainingly challenging. Such as one that I
Why
mentioned
can't I
before
barely
that
hear this?
automatically summons hordes every 2 minutes with the military sergeant going, "You made so much noise, every ridden in the area is coming down on you." It was to my understanding that the director you pride yourself on from the Left 4 Dead experience was the one that would silently determine when hordes would spawn depending on many different variables.
We monitor players, we monitor their actions, we monitor their health, and then we start choreographing the world around them. And the idea is to guarantee that everybody gets a roller coaster ride.
But to have a constant timer and the narrative say, "Yep, you weren't making noise, but I'm saying you made noise, so here comes a horde," just irritates me. We have corruption cards that force a hunger mechanic that make you search for food as you gradually take 1 trauma damage due to hunger every 15 seconds. Common Infected will also have corruption cards that change how they are to their core features. Zombie and volatile, meaning headshots from any source will cause them to explode and knock you back with damage, being really annoying in high altitude areas and making melee feel unfun suddenly. Maybe if they were in league with Uncommon Infected like in Left 4 Dead 2 and were infrequent and designated to certain levels, but randomly having them in your face and getting bopped everywhere again is pretty damn annoying and seems like an idea thrown out and not really debated about for too long.
Wow, I've been
Speaking
grinding
of
all
ideas that
day,
have little
not
to no
one unlock
objection,
yet.
some commons will have acid that pours out of them when they die, like Left 4 Dead 2 Spitter, and while read on paper is really just annoying again to deal with, as the numbers pile up and the acid
kind of
remains
mission is this?
still hard to see. If you remember, that was
All I
also
need
an
is
argument
samples. I don't
we
need
talked
to
about,
be
but we'll get into that when I talk about special ridden. In lieu of the AI director randomly spawning special infected, ridden, corruption guards can be added to your deck randomly throughout a campaign, which kind of gets rid of even more of that AI director mystery. Usually it would like spawn a charger in Left 4 Dead, and here it's like, oh, in the top right of your HUD, you psychosomatically
just kick me?
know
What
that
happened?
crushers are just now going to start spawning. So be prepared. I hope you know how to combat them. It's weird that it's being telegraphed to the survivors, even though it's supposed to be this randomized kind of event. With how much half of these corruption cards that generally pop up and make you go, oh no. I sometimes want to skip a level or rush through it as fast as possible
Why
because
do
I
you
just don't want to
go to
play
start
with
a
these
mission and
reload
then stop?
modifier skulls on. That's what it feels like. It feels like I'm playing Halo with skulls active when I didn't want to have that. I'm sure the reason the corruption cards were added were to give extra challenge against the card builds and cleaners because they are kind of overpowered. Gives kind of a power dynamic between each. Some corruption cards give you bonus copper and give an extra challenge for each chapter, but like I said, most most of the time I just do not like them. I would rather just the director surprise me instead of, you know, having more money makes you slower, or you're gonna have 40 health, you get more health every second, but you better not get hit by anything that does a lot of damage. It changes it so much. And I know a lot of people, if they had the option to get around these, they would. Knowing people don't like most of these corruption cards, Turtle Rock probably implemented one of my least favorite features.
You're not talking to me either. That's crazy.
From killing themselves and resetting a level.
What's more important to me?
Corruption card and getting what they wanted, and that is the continue system.
Your sister? Nah. I'm sorry to tell you, that's not how it works in the real world.
Continues were a big point of contention for me at launch. The idea that you only get 1 or 2 tries per campaign, or acts,
oh my
rubs
god,
me
this
the
game
completely
is so
wrong way.
glitchy.
With Left 4 Dead exploring a campaign and only getting a reset to a safe room multiple times allows players to navigate a map, get familiar with it
all
as
of
they
us.
please without
It did
too
it to
much
all of
worry,
us.
as sometimes the AI director can either throw you a bone or absolutely avalanche you with infected. And in Back 4 Blood, that exploration is kinda hindered, and if luck isn't on your side, well, sucks for you.
Alright, it's time for
Mandatory
some
Iron
break. It's
Man
time for a break.
mutation back to
Let's
the
rock
beginning
and
of a long-ass act. And in a game where you can experiment with card builds, continues feel counterintuitive as experimentation feels like it needs to be ironclad before each playthrough.
In early versions of Left 4 Dead, if survivors failed a campaign at any point, we just put them right back at the beginning and made them play the whole thing over again. That meant that if the team dies in the last level, it'll be close to 45 minutes before they ever get back to that map to try something new. This made it hard for players to remember exactly what they'd done wrong, and so it was hard for them to decide what they might want to do differently. So now, when a team goes down, we just reset to the beginning of the level that they died on. This gives them a lot more freedom and flexibility in how they approach the most challenging sections.
At launch, and especially in the alpha and beta, the spawn rates for Special Ridden were just absolutely ridiculous. It still blows me away that the developers had such an oversight of this regard. The church level where snitchers spawn was absolute hell. I'm glad they at least took the advice of the player base and slowed down their spawn rates to a fairly reasonable degree. Everything else has stayed the same from what I've seen. Difficulty can be a sketchy territory for devs, as some just scale health and damage and call it a day. Back in Left 4 Dead, difficulty meant that everything did more damage, from witches insta-killing you, commons hitting you for 10 to 20 damage, and friendly fire doing more on expert. The most Left 4 Dead did was make a wider gap between your team and the tank, since it could insta-down you on expert with more than twice the health of a tank on easy. You had a basic idea of how a playthrough could go. In Back 4 Blood, however, everything has more health, and the odds would be wildly different thanks to ever-stacking corruption cards and harder starts from safe rooms. The main point of difficulty is increased amounts of corruption cards that can either make a level interesting to move through, or a pain in the ass. Difficulty increases do offer a bit more variety in Back 4 Blood due to these corruption guards, especially when they are starting to stack up more and more. But in a way, like playing a campaign of Halo with a masochistic friend who won't tell you the skulls that are active till the game boots up. That is the core identity of Back 4 Blood's difficulty. Health will still be hard for beginners to manage and get used to due to trauma health, that fun little mechanic that if damaged in certain ways, will limit your max HP until you use a healing station or use med kits in conjunction with certain types of cards. Some might say that it makes for a more interesting, nail-biting, and justly difficult experience. Maybe in a different game where damage is easier to avoid, would I agree with you. But in a Left 4 Dead zombies on multiple forms of steroids game like Back 4 Blood, the addition for there to be damage that can only be healed at health stations and be temporarily treated by pills is so eternally infuriating to me. I do not like the trauma health system, making a majority of healing items in the game basically useless if a special ridden spawns on top of you and knocks you from 80 to 40 health that you can't recover until you magically find a supply room is so annoying, unless you have certain healing cards.
You talking to me?
Down to having cards. On top of that, if you're playing high difficulties, your free uses of medical stations can be limited to 2 people, while further uses are relegated to spending about 4.
Let's not talk about Beyonce country music because it's annoying in general.
Would be toned down or give a few more uses. Now don't get me wrong, it is more manageable than before, but I'm only saying that because I was using Holly with a melee to heal build. The advent of trauma damage.
Hold on, one sec. I can barely hear you. Give me 1 second.
Because of this mechanic, which counteracts the idea
I gotta adjust the audio
with builds and
for you.
Unless you just default to using one of a few OP builds, even those that are nerfed.
Oh no, you sound better. Did you get closer to the mic?
The card-oriented system, meta.
Why do you sound better?
Meta, difficulties can vastly shift. But even
Now
with
finish
that
what you
being
were
said,
saying.
It's funny. Playing with flesh and blood people, I barely was able to scrape by with a decent amount of health on that low difficulty. The former hardest.
Hold on, one
In
second
that
actually.
and
Hold on,
attempting
because I got a
to
chance
pleasure
to.
in me and my buddies TK and Murmur, well, we did okay, even with a random player. Don't get me wrong, it's really hard when you have a lot of randoms, but that's just
Okay, talk.
kind of online game.
Hi, Editor Wisefish here. I just also wanted to question why the death sound effect sounds like this.
Hello?
For ages I
That's
thought
not the right
it was
one.
Wow's
What's
Twitch
the right
sound
one?
effect for a new subscriber or follower or something like that, but no, apparently
Hello?
it's the death sound effect, which doesn't make
That's
any
not what I
sense to me. It
said.
sounds like it's a positive thing, like the game's telling you, well done, you just killed someone off, congratulations, this is going to be much harder now. It just doesn't make sense to me. It needs to be more alerting and more impactful that this is a dangerous thing to happen. But yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why it's a positive sound effect. Anyway, back to learning.
But what made me laugh was the fact that I was able to progress through the entire game of Back 4 Blood on that exact same difficulty offline with bots with 90% efficiency and over
Okay, talk now.
200 health with ease. The game
There
is
you are.
way
There you are.
easier with bots. Bots are not the just dead-brained, can't do anything shells that they formerly were. Now they have the ability to throw grenades at random that don't harm you at all at a recharging infinite supply, healing items they will always have and randomly use on you, stack tons of overhealing and healing efficiency.
What were you
cards,
saying
being
about
special
Beyonce and
for
country
you
music
at
that I don't
reduced
really want to hear
damage,
because you're
them
my friend?
always
I'll
being
listen
able
to
to
it.
use a healing station at no cost, you having tons of copper at the end of each level because they don't use copper.
I
and
know.
always dropping the ammo
Like she's
you
the first one to try to open doors.
type runs low, and them not even needing to be present in the safe room to
Little House X was not that long ago, and he wasn't even the first.
one bot on your team, despite them sometimes killing themselves because the pathing in these AI can be a bit fucky, but it's insane the difference in a cooperative shooter that having less people to play with in a co-op makes my experience easier. And the
You tell him. I'm glad you're finally on my side, I'll be honest for once. You have to like her because your sister. Or you have to pretend like you like her because your sister. So what is your opinion of Beyonce though? Do your sister know you think she's just okay? Wow, what a shot. That was beautiful. And ugly at the same time. Wow. This team don't really need me. Are you... Nah, I was about to say. I'll let him catch up at the end. Where are the settings at for this? How do I... Got sold? What does that mean? You got sold into slavery? What is that? What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Don't get me wrong, my friends were pretty decent at Back 4 Blood, just as well off as me, but man was it a breeze with bots on offline mode. And also, offline isn't completely meaningless to play anymore. At launch, you were not allowed to get any supply points or earn any achievements from the game while playing offline. Now, you can do that and earn however you like. Good on Turtle Rock for realizing not everyone wants to earn nothing for just wanting to play offline with bots, since the core feature of the game is to earn points for goodies, cards, and whatsoever. Thinking about it though, it's one of those, if you would have just sat down for 5 minutes and thought about it as a developer publisher, or just thinking from the perspective of a gamer, you would have realized it was just a really lame idea to not allow earning points or achievements offline in the first place. But offline is not an option for the even higher difficulty known as No Hope. Think Destiny's raids, where no matchmaking is allowed and no bots, unless someone leaves or you don't have enough people, and you have to put together a full team on your own, with no continues or lives, with bosses spawning on each level and more corruption cards being at play on top of no additional health or ammo at the start of each chapter. It's honestly a great way to test your game knowledge, your builds, and team synergy. If you're down for that, go for it. I'll be completely honest and say, I never tried this. I'm not going to pretend like I did, mainly because I only have 3 friends that I was regularly playing with, and I didn't want to train up a 4th or go searching for another player online. Difficulty isn't really something I look for in a game, moreover just fucking around with mechanics, and to not make a playthrough agonizingly unbearable, unless it's for a stupid Left 4 Dead 2 speedrun challenge video like I've done in the past. Go check those out if you have the time. While I'm happy for those that appreciate a decent challenge in No Hope, and the fact that it rewards more supply points, I'm happy with how Nightmare difficulty left me off, and the fact that now lives and continues are obsolete outside of having to use their added burn cards, and needing certain builds to circumvent this leads to a more World of Warcraft setup for a raid and execution when all I'm trying to do is sit down and casually play. Yeah, I'm a filthy casual. But so are a majority of people. And I feel like Back 4 Blood's lower than expected numbers may have been them catering towards a more difficulty-oriented experience rather than a well-rounded one. And if there's one thing I'm not a fan of, is studios designing their games around the most skilled and sweatiest players. It plagues Overwatch, Halo, and so many other PvP experiences. But then again, this isn't PvP, and whatever you do here doesn't go into PvP. It's a purely co-op campaign experience that is completely different from Swarm mode. But speaking of the co-op campaign, how are the campaign and levels themselves? While the game itself is beautiful, cool to look at, especially with ridden hives and growths populating areas, tons of small Easter eggs and routes to look around in. The thing with all of that is that it loses its luster with me after dozens of playthroughs. For me, I don't like playing games purely for their pretty environments and detailed looks. Don't get me wrong, it's cool to have, but once you're used to how it looks, you overlook it and absorb more over the level's layout and design. Don't get me wrong again, the team did great with US suburban life and forest-like areas being swallowed up by the apocalypse and the ridden worms. And there are some proponents of the level design that are great and some that irk me. There will be some missions where you'll repeat an objective ad nauseum, like destroying 3 to 4 nodes in order to open up the next area, with each node summoning a new horde, like gas cans to Left 4 Dead's Yin. But with nodes and mission objectives in general, the exact location of each object is not clearly shown to you for a few minutes. So you'll be blindly running around hoping you'll stumble on these items and stuff you need to destroy so you can progress. Meandering and trying to find objectives only allows the director and timers to bleed out and cause further hordes to spawn, and the AI director punishing you for not really knowing where to go. Now, I'll go over some of the best and worst parts of the chapters as we go on. Now, Act 1 starts off as an 11-part campaign, and while Chapter 1 serves as a decent starting off point, much like No Mercy and Dead Air's first chapters, to get the player familiar with the world and mechanics to a degree, like crows, climbing, horde spawning events at the bridge, wall babies, and more. But Chapter 2, having a mandatory ogre spawn near the start of the level feels like a drastic difficulty curve. Left 4 Dead didn't even consider mandatory boss spawns until the Witches of Hard Rain and the train tank in the Sacrifice. While the sight of the ogre breaking through the earth and tearing the fence makes for good trailer footage and something cool to bear witness to in the alpha and betas, it just becomes a chore of trying to dash past it in time before it actually starts attacking, and to some being a run killer as it crushes new players unwary of how to deal with it and what to do. This chapter and key moment feel like they weren't made for gameplay purposes and were more for promotional purposes, so they could slap it in trailers, so it could be like a oh shit moment in the alpha and beta, just to have this giant evolved like beast emerge from the earth. But once something is played multiple times, that pizzazz is lost. And I feel like Turtle Rock didn't have the foresight to think of that. They were just like, oh, if we put this in the very beginning, people are going to be like, oh shit. But when you played it a lot, you're going to be like, oh shit. So if you get what I mean. In the 4th chapter, basically the first pseudo finale of blowing up the boat becomes just a speed run. Awkward. To get C4 planted on a boat and run back out and dip against a timer. Now, the tension of escaping the boat is pretty cool. I do like that you have a timer, you have to go up all those flights of stairs and make sure everyone tries to get out of there. It is pretty nail-biting. Although the military convoy that shows up really should put up more of a fight to help you instead of just sitting there like dumb AI. Now, fighting a breaker at the gas station is a decent first glance of a boss ridden in the next chapter, and should have been the first boss you faced, as you were given a fighting chance with rooftop AI, a decent space to fight, and barely any common ridden to slow you down. It is fun facing him, as this particular boss ridden never runs away, and it has ample weak spots to go after. Afterwards, you'll have to save survivors from being bound in worm cocoons. Now, this is recycling the game mechanic of saving survivors that have died and respawned. It really honestly feels weird that these AI survivors are being purposefully drugged and put into these cocoons, because it was my recollection that this parasite was highly infectious. So binding non-infected survivors that are, I don't think they're immune for, I don't know, some purpose, I guess, to use their flesh, but you could have infected them. It just seems strange and just a way to reuse the rescue cleaner assets to really inflate mission time. On top of that, it's kind of funny, after saving them, you can just leave them in the middle of the horde and rush to the safe room, and the mission will be considered successful anyway. Reused ideas also come forth in the chapter Bookworms, where you must board up windows to create a safe room, a la Call of Duty Zombies in a way. It works well enough and has cleaners weighing who should hinder themselves with piles of wood to board up entry points for the ridden and make sure less of them are coming in, but you'll have to protect them. It's a pretty neat little mechanic. The end of the second part of Act 1 sees you turning on a jukebox to play loud-ass music and beat down on ridden as you protect the music maker. This is my favorite level to play through in the original game, as it's just pure ridden kill and fun at its core. Plenty of supplies, vantage points, and more. However, the fact that copywritten music was placed on the sound slider at launch with no option of turning copywritten music off for streamers, and if a streamer wanted to play, they had to mute the entire sound space except for dialogue, shows that, again, there was oversight for a problem that could have easily been nipped in the bud if Turtle Rock had thought just a little bit ahead. Thankfully, they did fix that, but still, every time I play that level, I have painful muted flashbacks, making sure my YouTube stream wouldn't receive any kind of copyright takedown notice. The end of Part 3 has you defending a diner in a similar fashion, having to fight off a horde with a timer, allowing you to set up with the barbed wire and other supplies right beforehand, so pretty much a traditional Left 4 Dead finale. I just love doing this straightforward stuff, and the layout of this pseudo-finale at the diner is great for a horde. Although, unlike getting into a rescue vehicle at the end, once the timer runs out, it just ends abruptly. You could have a tall boy or wretch right on top of you, slaughtering you and your squad, and it will just suddenly jump to, "You did it! Good job! Back up! Everyone pat yourselves on the back! There's no more threats!" It's just weird that I'm just used to rescue vehicles taking you out of there, but now it's just, oh, we auto-deleted all the ridden, and now it's A-okay, the mission's done. It's not the worst thing in the world. I still love playing that mission. Section 3 of Act 1 sees you through barns and neighborhoods where some of the best showcases of the game's aesthetics and light design are shown off. If this set of levels were the starting off point, I think people would have been more enthralled by Back 4 Blood, to be honest. The barn and crossing the river, navigating decently made forest areas, and the wrecked neighborhood you navigate through each house in were fun, even though sometimes I would get a little bit lost. Finally, after 11 chapters, you face the finale after all of that, and it is a bit lackluster. Even though we just got to fight 2 giant hordes, now you have to have this objective where you have to fire mortar shells at a tunnel entrance to close it off so more ridden can't come up. Having to procure the shells to load and fire seems like a dead center finale where you have to get gas cans and all around. But here, each shell is readily right nearby the cannon. It feels so different from everything else, since you can easily spam pipe bombs to keep commons off, and since you don't need to move far to get your objectives, the finale can seem like a joke if you are well prepared. The mechanic is cool though, don't get me wrong, and having ogres appear here feels real fitting. Honestly feels like this should have been the first place they spawn because it's a giant open area where you're well prepared to fight something of that magnitude. That would have been the best place for it to be the first set spawn. But since we have multiple parts with pseudo finales, and to get to this point of an 11-part act, this right here does not feel like it should be the definitive finale for this giant act. The fact that you can get an assortment of limited continues on the longest act for your first playthrough is a bit excessive. I feel like Act 1 could have been easily split into 2 acts. It's not like parts 1 and 2 of Act 1 fed into the narratives of parts 3 and 4, since they all really play independently of one another, of just save survivors, until we get to the plot point of, oh, there's a hole they're crawling out of. Go plug it and blow it up. Considering Acts 2, 3, and 4 are locked for being played until each respective act is completed, starting off with the longest was just a bad design choice for a general audience. It just feels like a gauntlet for anybody to get through. Of course, I'm sure the main reasoning is so people can retain their characters' built-up progress, guns, and cards more easily, but I can't help but feel like I have to complete an act since they are parts of a complete package design-wise. Left 4 Dead never exceeded 5 chapters, some being at 4, others 2 and 3, but these were all made with the thought of similar playtimes and retained consistency for the most part. Let's not get into hard rain chapters part 4 and 5. Left 4 Dead 1's campaigns were originally designed to be independent experiences that eventually were given a continuity. Left 4 Dead 2 was the originally planned journey of 4 survivors attempting to survive from Savannah to New Orleans. Back 4 Blood prides itself on a cohesive narrative, but for the first few acts, it feels like it had Left 4 Dead 1's non-connected campaign philosophy in mind, just randomly rolling out to help survivors and take out random holes. This game honestly didn't need the acts to be linear or play this way until Act 3 rolled around, where an actual cohesive narrative actually started coming together. Now, Act 2 consists of progressing through a destroyed police department to pop tons of nodes. This honestly is my least favorite level to play, as the node mechanic is heavily used here, and it is all over the map, where you have to take out like 4 hive mind node things, and good luck finding them all, and just, I just don't have fun with it. But I do like the fact that you get some guy's arm to use as a melee weapon to use his fingerprints to get into the safe room. I gotta hand it to him. Creative way to get into the safe room. I'll give it a 4 out of 5. From there, you'll get a highly detailed cutscene where you see it's an empty armory. There you go down a sewer hole where you can accidentally be split up from your team on a wonky slide mechanic and deal with an okay horde event that you don't realize that you have to progress through a giant manhole to get to the end of the sewer. This was a crescendo that I didn't even realize. That's another thing. Back 4 Blood has a hard time of simply telling you what's actually going on. In Left 4 Dead 2, if a crescendo event where you must get to a certain point or safe room before a horde will even end, then an on-screen indicator will point you in that direction and say quite blatantly, you need to get going. Chapter 2 of the Parish, as soon as the horde is called in the CETA quarantine area, the game says, hit the button on the high scaffolding or this ain't ending. If Back 4 Blood was in charge, you'd figure that out on your own and wait at the bus station door for God knows how long before the game goes, oh, you're stupid enough to not know the buttons up there? Go press it, you idiot. But that would only be after about 2 to 3 minutes of wondering what is going on. On first-time playthroughs where continues are a thing, it would be nice to have mission crucial entry points and objectives highlighted to you just a little bit more frequently, and maybe have higher difficulties make it where you have to find them on your own. Rant aside, the sewers are flushed away as you go through confusing roundabouts of a series of warehouses before going into a flooded trailer park. The flooded trailer park being another decent set piece, as I grew up in a trailer park and this is kind of fun to just rummage around in. But as to not make this review obnoxiously long, or to make this a complete campaign review series that I don't want to do anymore, nor to make my wonderful editor Wisefish's life absolutely miserable trying to get this done, I'll just move to the end of Act 2 Part 2, where you must jump over multiple downed boats and debris to procure supplies for a helicopter. This area right here, while really cool to see, I like how it is, showcased kind of another blunder in the game's mechanics for me. The open bodies of water everywhere are hard to tell at some points if it's shallow or not. I think most people have died from this mistake by falling in. And while in Left 4 Dead, if you were to walk off a fall off point, you'd instantly go into a hanging down state where you need to be pulled up.
No, I'm too scared to go help her up. I'll save you! What? Because you know they don't... They're
Yeah, because I'm the dumbass. I'm the dumbass that had to follow the hole.
Rex,
I've been there.
Lord, not dead. Oh god, here we go.
Here, it's no telling if you'll actually hang or outright die. Since these are the last 2 levels of this part and 7 chapters in, it's really aggravating to have this happen in a continues-based game, especially when some ridden have the ability to propel you heavily in different directions, even when you are trying to just defend yourself and they just pop and you just go flying. Now, we have another tangent, but this is based on the mechanics, but the mechanic of being downed was pretty well made in Left 4 Dead. When you are downed, you can use just a pistol to help out others and there's no friendly fire, and then when someone tries to get you up, you have an animation, leaving the person that's getting you up prone to enemy attacks. And if the downed person is hit, the action is reset. That's the same for when you are hanging off edges. But in Back 4 Blood, when you are hanging off an edge, not only is there a load bar to fill up to get you rescued, but there is also an additional animation of you slowly getting up. And as that's going on, you are completely open to attacks. What was the point of the load bar if there is no animation to go along with it? I don't know why both being rescued and getting up are 2 separate things, but that's another thing that should have been borrowed verbatim from Left 4 Dead. It was all one thing. Since during this secondary animation, You could be knocked off again to where you'll instantly die, or force you to take damage and do nothing about it. This is another thing I'm going to compare it to Left 4 Dead in, but in Left 4 Dead, when you are picked up or you get out of being pinned, you are granted a very brief window of invulnerability so you can gather your bearings or to get out of an animation to prevent infected from instantly attacking you in your already low health state from being killed or downed again the second you get up. I don't know how many times in a high stress situation when someone picked me up and then as soon as I got up, I'm still getting through the animation, trying to figure out my situation, and something like an exploder or tallboy or ogre comes out of nowhere and attacks me during the animation that I can't do anything about, and I die before I even get a chance to pull my weapon out. Left 4 Dead gave leniency in an environment where tons of shit is being thrown at you from every direction. It is not fun to be stuck in your game's mechanics and animations just to be killed outright, risking your precious lives and continues. This feels like yet another small detail that was overlooked that can prevent a lot of angry gamer words and moments. Now the final part of Act 2 has you going back through the gas station area, but this time in a horde event where going through the gates will have an onslaught of infected, ridden coming charging through. This is another favorite level of mine for its simplicity. You stay on one end of the street with up to 2 mounted machine guns taking down tons of specials and an ogre. Kind of like a siege-based kind of tower defense thing trying to slow down the horde before they can reach you so you can progress through the old map that you've been through. Seems like this map is where the best fights occur, although this was pretty damn good for farming supply points back in the day. I remember I spent about 5 hours one time just on this level, beating it, rushing through, going back in, but they kinda nerfed that. They saw that people were having fun. The next chapter has you in front of a 4-leaf clover diner fighting numerous boss-ridden in an arena-type environment. This right here being another good example of having the ogre spawn and fighting it with ample prep. Sometimes you can fight another breaker, you fight a little bit of everything. I really like this and I wish there was a little bit more of it. This right here being another good example of having the ogre and breaker spawn and fighting it with ample prep. The finale of Act 2 has you at the Death Toll Church, and while this can be a relentless finale, it's weird that it takes a while to get to. And once you're there, you have to kill 5 snitches here after stumbling on them. But you remember the mechanic of if you kill a snitch before it alerts a horde that a horde won't spawn? They said, fuck it, we're just gonna say no.
So that was a fucking lie.
Instead, killing them will always spawn a horde, so what's the point of having that game mechanic? Why introduce the feature of killing a snitch before it snitches, even if you're gonna have them snitch anyways to make it a finale? Snitches get stitches, but in this, snitches get bitches. It doesn't feel right, man. That's against the street code, man. Why not just do the node thing or have church bells to ring to initiate the horde? Mechanics aside though, this finale is pretty okay. You can take it as you go. You have to do 5 different objectives to get the horde coming in. If you don't just bum rush them outside, you can bunker down inside the church after each one. You can take it as you go and figure out different strategies. I don't mind that. It makes for a unique and dynamic finale, but it doesn't really feel like a finale right here. The entire act just ends on this high-res cutscene of this old dude going, "You did good, kids." This church being the finale to this 9-part act after the whole airlifting supplies out of a barge seems weird to just have a cutscene for this brief encounter and then be like, okay, on to Act 3. But I guess that's because Act 3 is where some narrative actually starts picking up. Okay, one more tangent, and I promise we will wrap up the level design and campaign stuff. Speaking on the behalf of cutscenes, at the start of some chapters, we will sometimes get classic in-game engine cutscenes to show off the costumes that you've gotten for your cleaners, to show the transition to the next part, or detailed looks into the cleaners and their fight against the Ridden. And sometimes we get pre-rendered cutscenes that are kind of cool too. Cutscenes are neat to have, but but serve as another example of the difference of Turtle Rock's development and design philosophy without Valve's guidance. Originally, cutscenes were planned to be included in Left 4 Dead 2 to bridge the gap between each campaign to show a more detailed look of how they would go from something like Dead Center to Dark Carnival. And while I would have loved to have more high-definition clips of the group to watch for my old Left 4 Dead videos, the idea was ultimately scrapped in favor of replayability. In Back 4 Blood, we got cutscenes to show the end of chapters, the end of acts, and more. While as a YouTuber, having B-roll footage from cutscenes is a godsend, and watching them for the first time is enjoyable. But in the long run, it's another case of replayability and thinking of the game long-term versus, hey, look how cool this is great for trailer footage. Eventually, you'll have seen these cutscenes so many times that you'll be spamming the skip button, just like you probably spammed the skip button on the ad that played during this video. I ain't judging you for that. I don't like watching ads either. However, the sucky part is that if you're playing with randoms or a friend of yours, and your friend decides to take a shit, or somebody just wants to watch the whole thing, you may be stuck in a safe room while somebody watches a cutscene for the upteenth time, preventing you from accessing the crates from which you buy supplies from and get ready. While I get why all players have to go through a checklist of all the cards that are active, readying up, skipping the cutscene before loading in, preventing players from readying up their supplies because of all this elongates sitting in the safe room and ends up causing a lot of doing nothing. Look, I just want to play the game. I get it that the safe room door shouldn't open, but why block off the case in which you buy supplies from? I don't want to wait on somebody that has a slower connection, or somebody that wants to watch the trailer, or somebody that is just decided to go watch a YouTube video and start jacking off or something. I just want to play and get ready, that way things can go by quicker. Anyways, after Act 2, Act 3 sees the continuity actually take off as the cleaners search for Dr. Rogers, a brilliant scientist who apparently has concocted a chemical weapon to combat the Ridden. Going through another farm where you can find a crop harvester that can be activated via the toolkit to easily get through is neat, and I like watching it chop up the commons, even though the animation isn't the best. And the barn area is pretty well made to fight in, which, another tangent, I'm sorry, but with the toolkit, it feels like a necessity to always have on at least one survivor, as loot doors are always randomly spawned through maps and can unlock areas of the map, or even skip portions like doors to get around node sections or make boats that you ride on go faster, and to get around alarmed doors, that way you don't set them off and cause a horde. It's weird that you need this specific supply so often. Now, the level after that being set in I guess a forest that's on fire. There's spots of tiny little bits of flames here and there, but barely a forest fire that mandates the sudden flame-ridden suddenly spawning with fire-ridden branches smacking you in the head if you get too close. Maybe if the area was like the end of Dead Center's first chapter and fire was everywhere in certain parts of the map, this would make sense. But it's like they forgot to add 95% of the fire to this level. Maybe this is the aftermath of the forest fire, but I doubt a body would be burning for this long and still maintaining it. Anyways, you'll go to a series of cabins where you need to probably circumvent alarmed doors, another added horde spawner that if opened or shot will call a horde. Although these days you can't wait for commons to simply break it down. It was a fun little mechanic that was not intended by Turtle Rock. Me and my friends would just go right up against the alarm door and wait for commons to break it down. But Turtle Rock changed that mechanic to where an alarmed door must be picked open by a toolkit or opened or destroyed before any other doors can be taken down. Once an alarmed door has been activated, all other nearby ones can be suddenly broken down by the Ridden, meaning Turtle Rock saw people found away their game mechanic and were having fun with it, and then said, no, you have to do it our way. Like, I get it, that's the intended focus of it, but sometimes there's an alarmed door there that you can do nothing about, and there's an objective that says don't set off any alarms. So there's no way to circumvent it if you don't have a toolkit, so it's just really annoying, and is another example of a mechanic that Valve would probably allow to stay in its original state, as again, it was a funny way to wait at the door and to try to get Ridden to break it down and circumvent. Doors could still be shot and accidentally opened, but now it's just a forced mechanic. Another tangent, I'm sorry, that's the ADHD talking, but you'll face that throughout the campaign, and in this level specifically, you'll need to find somehow a car battery in the dozens of camp cabins to progress, feeling a lot like Friday the 13th the game. However, in this one instance, a singular object amongst like, I guess 10 cabins being hard to find makes sense instead of multiple objectives like 20 nodes that you have to blow up in order to progress through the level. Next is a garden area. The greenhouse fight where you pop some nodes is the only time in the game I really don't mind this popping nodes mechanic, and is one of my top 5 set pieces. This greenhouse is awesome to look at. However, that is sullied by the fact that you deal with a hedge maze that people can get lost in pretty hard. Act 3 Part 1's end has you at Dr. Rogers' house as he fires off his chemical weapon into a ridden hive. Despite it being improbable that he could have worked on this by himself, so close to a hive, with tons of these things that could take down entire civilizations, they didn't break into his house and stop him. Anyways, we watch the nuke go off on the hive, and the horde being summoned. But before you can escape on the truck after witnessing this, you must go inside his house, find randomly scattered out research crates that he left behind, bring those out to the escape truck outside while ogres and tons of infected are spawning. Finding these crates across the huge house is not fun for a finale. Marking them from the get-go would make this tolerable. Trying to find them is just not fun, especially because you have stuff like exploders and tall boys coming into these cramped spaces of this house, and it's just really annoying to get around. It's an okay way to end the first part, although the mechanic of carrying the crates and throwing them feels so clunky. I'm sure everyone has noticed this, but it makes me wish they had the physics of the Source engine that Left 4 Dead had, as throwing any carryables like gas cans or propane tanks or these crates is so stiff and laggy. It feels like this mechanic was never finalized, because if you ever throw anything like that, it doesn't have physics of an actual object. It kind of just lags in the air and then just lands perfectly. I can't believe the game's a year old and it's still acting this way. After that, you'll go through a crematorium where you have to find an access key card, old school Doom style, and trying to find that can be annoying. And then you gotta open it, but don't touch the fire, it is gonna kill you. And then you go to a middle school. The environment of the school mixed with the ridden is another one of my favorite set pieces. Although the gym battle against the ogre is cramped, and the hitbox of the ogre can be pretty annoying. But it offers a good fight, and it reminded me a lot of the bloater boss fight from the first Last of Us. The second to last chapter will have you going through a dark quarantine camp. Another favorite set piece of mine that I love to go through, and the crescendo event of opening up each barricade in a tunneled area seems very similar to chapter 2 of the parish and is pretty intense to fight through. I would say this is phenomenal because it is just hectic and is what I was looking for in a Left 4 Dead-like game. And to end things off, you'll enter the best piece of lore and set piece, hands down, being this giant field of dead bodies that civilizations trying to destroy the bodies and get rid of them, but the ridden were eating away at them. And then you'll see that because of this, there are just tons of ogres out in this giant wide open area. Now, while fighting a bunch of these sounds pretty daunting, you have a new grenade type, the T5 grenade, that will be given by the truckload. You'll have tons of them. You won't have to worry about trying to see if you'll have enough, which when you use this, when it hits a ridden, will either cause commons to die or cause special ridden to take 800% more damage. So think of the slag type element from Borderlands. That's basically what this is. Meaning, if you chuck these at ogres, it will actually make them fun to fight and not just Destiny bosses with a lot of artificially inflated health. While you, of course, have to destroy nodes that will summon a new ogre each time you do it. This newly introduced grenade and the giant open fight area make this quite the finale from pretty much everything that embodied Back 4 Blood. It's hectic, it forces you to stay on the move and use teamwork, and is just fun. I just wish a majority of the levels beforehand felt this way. I wish I
thought I was streaming that entire time.
What was it, 20 chapters to get to this point, or close to it? But once you get that done, you have reached the end of the game and the final act. For the final act, you'll only deal with one chapter that's all focused around a kaiju fight. This cutscene leading up to it is great, and I'm a sucker for kaijus. I can't help but thinking this monster was probably a leftover design from a DLC monster Evolve never got to have. But what about the actual gameplay against it? Well, the build you've been using throughout the rest of the acts probably won't be doing anything good here. Melees will be nearly useless as you're going against such a huge target. So you'll have to switch up to long-range damage builds, increased healing builds, and possibly increased grenade builds, because suddenly this game became a 3-part Borderlands fight. Also, since this is one singular level, you can just reset till you get the guns and supplies you want in the starting safe area with no penalty, which I don't see why continues are even a thing for a single chapter act. The first part starts you off with tentacles with lots of health that will slam the ground and spew acid upon death. This is probably where you're going to take a bulk of your damage and my least favorite part of the fight, as it's less kaiju and just more hentai. Plus, I just don't really like fighting these because specials are spawning from every direction and you're just going to get hit because the tentacles are going to hit you. You got to get away. Killing these tentacles and going down their hole, the kaiju will be underground, where you must watch telegraphed attacks of these tentacles, avoid being hit long enough for it to open its mouth and attack its weak spot. This does feel like just about any kind of first-person shooter boss fight of Destiny in Borderlands. Once you cure it of its mouth herpes, you must chase it down and attack more weak spots as it crawls towards Fort Hope in the underground tunnel system. This right here is really cool to see and kind of deal with, but can be really finicky and a buggy mess sometimes. Sometimes you won't be anywhere near it, and it will register if it collides with you, and suddenly you'll be insta-downed or outright killed, despite needing to stay relatively close to find the weak spots all over its body on both the left, right, and top of it. Being on a timer only stresses you to do so to kill these weak spots as fast as possible and get up close as well. Because if it runs out, you fail, no matter how low its health is. Bots especially weren't made with this giant thing in mind, as they'll just casually walk up to its hitbox and instantly die. This happened a lot. I do like watching it crawl through the hive tunnels and seeing its capabilities, and it's a good way to end the campaign. Even though this little boss fight can be a bit finicky, it is really cool. And overall, the levels can be really hit or miss with mechanics and designs, sometimes being repetitive in a darkly vibrant environment. I only wish most of the game had more of these giant kaiju.
In a world where competition is commonplace, experience a game that brings players back